The security footage showed everything in stark, undeniable clarity. My best friend of 15 years leaning across my kitchen counter toward my 17-year-old son, her manicured fingers trailing down his arm while he backed away, confusion and discomfort written across his young face. My hands trembled as I gripped my phone, watching the timestamp tick forward to show her pursuing him toward the refrigerator, her body language predatory in a way that made bile rise in my throat. I'd installed those cameras 3 months ago to monitor package deliveries, never imagining they would capture this betrayal. Good day, everyone. I am grateful you are here with me. Before we begin, I would really love to know where you are watching from. Comment your city below. Now, let me tell you about something that changed my life forever. The discovery happened on a Tuesday afternoon when I'd left work early with a migraine. I'd pulled into my driveway at 2:47 p.m., noticing Elena Hartwick's silver Mercedes still parked at the curb despite our lunch plans having ended 2 hours prior. My stomach tightened with an inexplicable dread as I sat in my car, watching my own front door. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the suburban street, and a neighbor's wind chimes created an eerie soundtrack to the unease crawling up my spine. I'd reached for my phone to check the home security app, more out of habit than suspicion. The live feed showed my living room empty, but movement in the kitchen caught my attention. I switched cameras, and there she was, Elena, wearing the same crimson blouse she'd worn to our lunch, standing far too close to my son Darius. He'd just gotten home from his after-school job at the community center, still in his staff polo shirt and khakis. His backpack lay discarded by the kitchen island. The angle of the camera revealed what my son couldn't see: how Elena had positioned herself between him and the exit. Her 46-year-old frame blocked his path as she reached up to touch his shoulder, her lips moving in words the silent feed couldn't capture. Darius stepped sideways, his body language screaming discomfort as he tried to maintain polite distance. The boy I'd raised to respect his elders was trapped by his own good manners. My migraine vanished, replaced by a white-hot fury that made my vision sharpen to crystal clarity. I threw open my car door with such force it bounced back, nearly catching my hip as I stormed toward my house. My heels clicked like gunshots on the concrete walkway. The key fumbled in my shaking hand before I managed to thrust it into the lock. The front door crashed open. I covered the distance through my living room in seconds, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The scene in the kitchen froze like a photograph. Elena's hand still extended toward Darius, her expression shifting from sultry confidence to shocked guilt in the space of a heartbeat. Darius's eyes met mine, relief flooding his features so intensely that my maternal instincts roared to life with volcanic force. "Mom?" he breathed, and that single word contained multitudes. Elena's hand dropped to her side. Her carefully applied lipstick seemed garish now, predatory. She smoothed her blouse with trembling fingers, manufactured innocence settling across her features like a mask. "Cassandra, you're home early. I was just—" "Get out of my house." The words emerged cold and flat, each syllable deliberate. I pointed toward the door, my arm rigid as steel. Elena's mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a fish gasping for air. Her hand clutched at her purse on the kitchen counter, fingers white-knuckled against the leather. She took a tentative step backward, her heel catching on the tile with a sharp scrape that pierced the silence. "Cassandra, you're completely misunderstanding." I moved forward, my body language cutting off her words more effectively than any shout. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Behind me, I heard Darius shift toward the hallway, his sneakers squeaking as he put distance between himself and this confrontation. Good. He didn't need to witness what came next. Elena's eyes darted between my face and the door, calculating. A flush crept up her neck, staining her collarbone red beneath that deliberately unbuttoned blouse. She grabbed her purse, clutching it against her chest like a shield. "This is ridiculous. We were just talking about his college applications, and you're acting like..." "Like what?" The question emerged as a growl from deep in my chest. I crossed my arms, blocking the path to the rest of my house. "Like I didn't just watch you through my security camera? Like I didn't see every single thing you did?" Her face went pale, makeup suddenly stark against blanched skin. The purse slipped down her arm as her grip loosened. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, she stood completely still except for the rapid rise and fall of her chest. Then her expression hardened, shifting from caught prey to cornered predator. "You're paranoid." She spit the word out, straightening her spine. "Recording your own friends?" "That's pathetic, Cassandra. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, we could have an actual conversation about..." My hand shot up, palm out, stopping her mid-sentence. The gesture was pure instinct, borrowed from 20 years of corporate boardrooms, where I'd faced down men who thought they could talk over me. Elena flinched, actually stepped back. I moved toward her with measured steps, each footfall deliberate. She backed up, her hip colliding with the kitchen island. Her fingers scrabbled for purchase on the granite countertop behind her. The confident woman who'd been touching my son minutes ago had vanished, replaced by someone whose eyes couldn't quite meet mine. "My son is 17 years old." Each word dropped like a stone into still water. 17. Elena's mouth twisted, ugliness surfacing in the curl of her lip. She shoved away from the counter, squaring her shoulders. For a moment, I thought she might actually try to push past me, but her survival instincts kicked in. She moved toward the door instead, her movements jerky and graceless. At the threshold, she turned back. Her hand gripped the doorframe hard enough that her rings clicked against the wood. "You're overreacting. He's practically an adult, and frankly, maybe he needs someone who doesn't treat him like a child." The air left my lungs in a rush. My vision tunneled, focusing on her face with laser intensity. I took one step forward, then another, watching her bravado crumble as she stumbled backward onto my porch. "If you ever come near my son again, if you even think about contacting him, I will destroy you." The words emerged quiet, controlled, more terrifying than any scream. "I have everything recorded, every second. Do you understand what that means?" Elena's face cycled through emotions: defiance, fear, calculation, rage. Her hands balled into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms. A car drove past on the street behind her, its engine noise filling the silence between us. She opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. Turned on her heel and stalked down my walkway with forced dignity, her back rigid. I watched her fumble with her car keys, drop them, snatch them up from the concrete. Her sedan's engine roared to life with unnecessary violence, and she peeled away from the curb with a screech of tires that would have the neighbors talking. I stood in my doorway until her car disappeared around the corner, my body trembling with adrenaline. My hands shook when I finally gripped the door to close it. The lock clicked home with a finality that echoed through my bones. The house felt too quiet after the door closed. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood as I made my way to the kitchen, each step measured and deliberate. The phone still sat on the counter where I'd left it, screen black now, holding evidence that could tear apart more than just one friendship. I ran the faucet until the water turned ice cold, filled a glass to the brim. The liquid spilled over my fingers as I lifted it with shaking hands. 3 long swallows. Then I set it down hard enough that water sloshed onto the granite countertop. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window above the sink. Hair wild, eyes blazing, jaw clenched so tight my temples throbbed. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed. Each step brought me closer to the conversation I'd been dreading since the moment I'd discovered those text messages. My son's bedroom door stood closed at the end of the hallway, a strip of light visible underneath. Music thumped faintly through the walls, bass-heavy and too loud. I knocked twice, sharp raps that cut through the music. "Yeah?" His voice carried that teenage indifference, the casual dismissal that usually irritated me. Tonight, it felt like a knife. The doorknob turned under my palm. Inside, my son sprawled across his bed, laptop balanced on his stomach, earbuds dangling around his neck. Darius looked up with raised eyebrows, then saw my face and sat up straighter. The laptop slid sideways onto his navy comforter. "We need to talk." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me with deliberate care. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. 17 years old and already 6 feet tall, filling out with muscle from track practice, but right now he looked 12 again. Vulnerable. His fingers twisted the bedsheet, bunching the fabric between his knuckles. I moved to his desk chair and sat, positioning myself at eye level. The room smelled like teenage boy. Gym clothes, body spray applied too liberally, the remnants of the pizza he'd eaten for lunch. Posters covered his walls, a timeline of his interests from childhood superhero obsession to current hip-hop artists. Elena just left. I watched his reaction carefully. His shoulders tensed immediately, jaw tightening. His gaze dropped to his lap. "I saw the messages." "All of them." Red bloomed across his cheeks, spreading down his neck. He opened his mouth twice before words emerged. "Mom, I held up one hand, palm out. He stopped mid-sentence. "I'm not angry with you." The words came slowly, each one chosen with precision. "But I need to understand what happened, when it started. What she said to you." Darius rubbed both hands over his face, pressing hard against his eyes. When he lowered them, they were wet. He blinked rapidly, fighting tears with teenage stubbornness. His chest rose and fell with deep breaths as he gathered himself. The laptop screen behind him showed a paused video game, frozen mid-action. His backpack slumped against the wall near his closet, stuffed full with textbooks he'd been ignoring all week. Normal teenage life, interrupted by something that should never have touched him. His hands clenched and unclenched in his lap, a nervous gesture I recognized from his childhood. Finally, he looked up and met my eyes. The silence stretched between us like pulled taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. Darius wiped his nose with the back of his hand, then reached for the water bottle on his nightstand. His throat worked as he swallowed, buying time. The fluorescent stars on his ceiling, remnants from middle school, glowed faintly in the dim room. "It started at the barbecue," he finally said, voice cracking. "Back in July." My stomach dropped. 4 months. This had been happening for 4 months while I'd invited her into our home, shared meals with her, confided in her about my worries regarding Darius's college applications. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Darius pulled his knees up, wrapping his arms around them in a protective curl. His words came faster now, tumbling out like he'd been holding them behind a dam. "She cornered me by the garage when I was getting drinks from the cooler. Said I looked different, more mature. Touched my arm and let her hand slide down to my wrist. My fingernails dug into my palms. I forced my breathing to stay even, watching him continue. I thought maybe I was misreading it. She's your friend, right? But then she started texting me. Asked for my number to send me some article about basketball scholarships. He laughed bitterly, a sound too old for his face. There was never any article. The bed frame creaked as I stood abruptly, needing to move. I paced to his window, pushing aside the blinds. Outside, streetlights cast orange pools across the quiet neighborhood. Elena's house sat dark 3 blocks over, invisible from here, but suddenly too close. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, eyes hard, jaw set, shoulders squared like I was preparing for battle. Show me everything. I turned back to face him. All the messages, every photo she sent. Darius's hands trembled as he picked up his phone from the nightstand. He unlocked it, thumb hesitating over the screen before he handed it to me. The weight of it felt heavier than it should, loaded with evidence that would destroy a friendship and possibly more. I scrolled through the thread, my vision tunneling as the words registered. Compliments that crossed lines, questions about what he wore to bed, a photo of her in a dress, asking his opinion for a date night, another of her by a pool, the angle deliberate and provocative. My breath came shorter with each swipe. Did she ever touch you again? After that first time? The question came out sharper than intended. Darius flinched. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Last week, when she came over to return your book, you were in the shower? He pulled at a loose thread on his comforter, unraveling it methodically. She sat next to me on the couch, put her hand on my thigh, asked if I'd ever been with an older woman. The phone screen cracked under my grip. A thin line spiderwebbed across the glass, cutting through Elena's smiling face. Heat rushed through my chest, up my neck, pounding in my ears like war drums. I set the phone down carefully on his desk before I could do more damage. Darius watched me with wide eyes, afraid now of my reaction rather than his confession. I crossed back to him, sitting on the edge of his bed. My hand found his shoulder, squeezing firmly. His muscles relaxed slightly under my touch. You did nothing wrong, I said, enunciating each word. Nothing. Do you understand me? He nodded, but his eyes told a different story. Shame, confusion, the complicated tangle of adolescent hormones mixed with adult manipulation. I pulled him into a hug, feeling him collapse against me like he had when he was small, and the world hurt him. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. Over his head, I stared at the wall, my mind already 3 moves ahead. Elena had calculated this, chosen my son specifically because of our friendship, because she thought I'd never believe it or never find out. She'd weaponized trust and proximity, groomed him with patience and deliberation. The rage that filled me was cold now, sharp-edged and purposeful. I released Darius, holding him at arm's length to look at his face. Tears tracked down his cheeks, but his eyes met mine with something like relief. I need you to forward everything to my phone, I instructed. Every message, every photo, every call log. Can you do that? He wiped his face with his sleeve and reached for his phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced speed. My own phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket as the evidence transferred, each vibration like a nail being hammered into Elena's coffin. The drive to Elena's house took 17 minutes, though my foot pressed the accelerator harder than necessary. My knuckles had gone white against the steering wheel, the leather creaking under my grip. Through the windshield, the streetlights blurred into streaks of amber, each one counting down the distance between my rage and her doorstep. Her Honda sat in the driveway, passenger door still warm when I pressed my palm against it as I passed. She was home. My heart hammered against my ribs, a war drum that matched my footsteps across the concrete. The porch light illuminated dried leaves scattered across her welcome mat, the irony of that word making my jaw clench. I didn't knock. My fist pounded against the wood, 3 heavy strikes that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. A dog barked 2 houses down. Through the door's side window, I caught movement, a shadow shifting, approaching. The porch light clicked on, brighter now, and the deadbolt scraped. Elena opened the door halfway, her face shifting from casual curiosity to something else when she saw my expression. She wore yoga pants and an oversized sweater, hair pulled into a messy bun. So casual, so normal. The sight of her pretending at innocence made my stomach twist. "Cassandra, what?" I shoved the door hard enough that it swung back and hit the interior wall. She stumbled backward, catching herself against the entryway table. A glass vase rocked but didn't fall. I stepped inside, kicking the door shut behind me with my heel. The slam reverberated through the house. "You've got about 10 seconds to explain yourself before I forget we were ever friends." My voice came out low, controlled despite the inferno in my chest. Her eyes widened, but I saw the calculation behind them, that split-second decision of whether to play innocent or go on the offensive. She chose wrong. "I don't know what Darius told you, but—" The mention of his name from her lips snapped something. I closed the distance between us in 3 strides, my hand shooting out to grip her upper arm. My fingers dug into the soft flesh through her sweater. She gasped, her free hand coming up defensively. "Don't!" The word came out as a snarl. "Don't you dare say his name!" I released her with a push that sent her stumbling into the living room. She caught herself on the arm of her couch, chest heaving. Her face had gone pale, except for 2 spots of color high on her cheeks. Fear, finally. Good. My phone emerged from my pocket. I pulled up the forwarded messages, the screen brightness harsh in the dim room. I thrust it toward her face, watching her eyes track across the words, her own words, reflected back at her. The color drained completely now. "He's 17. Each syllable dropped like a stone into still water. 17 years old, and you've been messaging him for months." She opened her mouth, closed it, her hands twisted together at her waist, a nervous gesture I'd seen 1,000 times over 12 years of friendship. Now, it looked like the performance it always was. "It wasn't like that. We were just talking." Talking. I stepped closer, forcing her to retreat until her legs hit the couch. "You asked him if he'd ever kissed anyone. You told him he was handsome. You invited him over when I wasn't home." My hand moved faster than conscious thought, sweeping across the coffee table and sending a stack of magazines flying. They hit the floor with overlapping slaps, pages splaying open. Elena flinched, arms coming up to protect her face. "You groomed my son." The words tasted like poison. "You manipulated him, confused him, made him think he wanted something that a grown woman has no business offering a child." She straightened slightly, and I saw anger flash across her features now, competing with the fear. Her chin lifted in defiance that made my hands curl into fists. "He's not a child. He's almost 18. My palm connected with the lamp on the side table, sending it crashing to the floor. The bulb exploded with a pop, glass scattering across hardwood. Elena jumped back, pressing herself against the couch cushions. "Almost doesn't count, and you know it." I advanced again, every muscle in my body coiled. "You're 43 years old. What kind of sick?" The sound of the doorbell cut through my words. We both froze, staring at each other across the wreckage of scattered magazines and broken glass. The bell rang again, followed by a heavy knock. Elena's eyes darted toward the door, then back to me. Her throat worked as she swallowed. Neither of us moved. The knock came again, more insistent. "Ms. Whitmore? This is Officer Davis. We received a disturbance call." The blood drained from my face as I registered the words. Someone had called the police. My gaze snapped to Elena, who had gone perfectly still against the couch cushions, her chest barely moving with shallow breaths. The broken lamp lay between us like evidence at a crime scene. I forced my feet to move toward the door, each step feeling like I was wading through concrete. My hand trembled as it closed around the doorknob. The metal felt cold against my palm, slick with the sweat that had broken out across my skin. I pulled the door open 6 inches, keeping my body in the gap. The officer stood on my porch, one hand resting on his utility belt. Behind him, a patrol car sat at the curb, lights off, but radio crackling with static bursts. His eyes swept over my face, taking in details I couldn't see but could feel. The flush in my cheeks, the wild look I knew must be in my eyes. "Everything all right, ma'am?" His voice carried the practiced calm of someone trained to de-escalate. "Fine. Just had something fall." The lie scraped out of my throat. Behind me, I heard the soft creak of leather as Elena shifted on the couch. The officer's gaze moved past my shoulder, trying to see into the house. I shifted my weight, blocking more of the opening. My other hand gripped the doorframe so hard, my fingernails dug into the painted wood. "We received a call about shouting, things breaking." He pulled a small notepad from his pocket. "Neighbor reported what sounded like a physical altercation. Mrs. Chen next door." The retired teacher who spent her days tending roses and watching the street through her front window. My jaw clenched hard enough to make my teeth ache. The muscles in my neck had gone rigid, pulling my shoulders up into a defensive hunch. "Just an argument with a friend. It's handled." I started to close the door, but his boot moved forward, stopping against the frame. "I need to verify that everyone inside is safe." His tone remained even, but his hand had moved closer to his belt. "Is there anyone else in the house with you?" My heart hammered against my ribs. Behind me, I heard the whisper of fabric as Elena stood. Her footsteps crossed the living room, glass crunching under her shoes. She appeared at my shoulder, and I felt every muscle in my body go taut. "I'm fine, officer." Elena's voice had shifted, taking on a breathless quality that made my stomach turn. She touched her neck, fingers lingering on unmarked skin. "We just had a disagreement. Cassandra got upset and knocked over a lamp. That's all." The officer's eyes moved between us, weighing, measuring. His pen tapped against the notepad in a rhythmic pattern that matched the pulse pounding in my ears. I could smell the coffee on his breath, the starch in his uniform. "Ms. Foster, is that accurate?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. My throat had closed up, airway narrowing until each breath felt insufficient. He studied us for another long moment, then flipped his notepad closed. The snap of it shutting seemed impossibly loud. "I'm going to need both of you to keep it down. If we get called back here tonight, someone's leaving in handcuffs. Understood?" "Yes." The word barely made it past my lips. He stepped back, his radio squawking to life with dispatch calling about another incident across town. I watched him walk to his patrol car, every second stretching into eternity. The engine started. He pulled away from the curb. Only when his taillights disappeared around the corner did I allow myself to breathe. Elena moved past me into the living room. Her shoulder brushed mine, the contact sending a jolt of revulsion through my system. I slammed the door and spun around, but the white-hot rage from before had transformed into something colder, more dangerous. She bent down and picked up one of the scattered magazines, smoothing its crumpled pages with deliberate slowness. When she looked up, her expression had shifted again, settling into something calculating that made my skin crawl. "You need to think carefully about your next move, Cassandra." She set the magazine on the coffee table with precise placement. "That officer saw you destroyed your own property in a rage. I could press charges if I wanted to. Assault, intimidation, harassment." My hands opened and closed at my sides, nails biting into palms. The pain helped focus the chaos in my head. "I have text messages from your son." She pulled her phone from her pocket, holding it up like a shield. "Sweet messages, flirty messages, messages that show mutual interest. You think anyone will believe your version when they see proof that he wanted this?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I grabbed the back of the nearest chair, knuckles going white against the wood. She'd kept receipts, built herself a defense while she'd been grooming my child. My vision tunneled, the edges of the room blurring as blood pounded in my ears. I forced myself to release the chair, to stand straight, to not give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. The hardwood floor creaked beneath my bare feet as I crossed the space between us in 3 measured steps. She instinctively moved backward, her hip colliding with the arm of the couch. The phone wavered in her hand, screen still illuminated with whatever fabricated evidence she'd constructed. "Show me." The words came out flat, emotionless. I extended my palm upward, waiting. Elena's fingers tightened around the device. Her thumb moved across the screen, several quick swipes before she turned it toward me. The display showed a conversation thread, green and white message bubbles stacked in a damning timeline. My stomach lurched as I recognized my son's number at the top. I grabbed her wrist, pulling the phone closer. Her pulse hammered against my fingertips as I scanned the messages. Compliments about her appearance, inside jokes, a photo of him at basketball practice with a caption asking if she'd be there to watch. The timestamps showed conversations stretching back 2 months. My grip loosened. The phone slipped from my trembling fingers, bouncing once on the couch cushion, before settling between throw pillows. 2 months. While I'd been working double shifts at the hospital, while I'd been trusting her to help with rides and homework, she'd been systematically building this narrative. The room spun. I stumbled sideways, catching myself against the bookshelf. Framed photographs rattled, one tipping forward to crash face down on the shelf. Behind the glass, my son smiled up from his 8th grade graduation, gap-toothed and innocent. "You manipulated a child?" My voice cracked on the last word. I straightened, ignoring the way my legs threatened to give out. "You groomed him, made him think this was normal, that you were his friend?" Elena retrieved her phone, tucking it back into her pocket with careful deliberation. She crossed to the front window, peering through the blinds at the empty street beyond. The patrol car had long since departed. "I think you should consider what happens next very carefully." She turned back to face me, silhouetted against the window. "Your son is 17. In 6 months, he's legally an adult. You could destroy his reputation, his college prospects, his entire future by making this public." The words hit like physical blows. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the ottoman, head dropping into my hands. She'd thought of everything, built layers of protection around herself, while positioning my son as either willing participant or eventual legal adult. The manipulation went deeper than I'd imagined. Through my fingers, I watched her shoes cross back toward the door. Black heels clicking against wood, then silent on the entry rug. The doorknob rattled as she tested the lock. "I'll give you 48 hours to decide how you want this to go." Her voice came from somewhere above my bowed head. "We can make this disappear quietly. I'll move away, find work in another city. Or we can let the courts sort it out. Let everyone see those messages. Let your son explain to college admissions boards why his name appeared in a scandal." My head snapped up. She stood with her hand on the doorknob, posture relaxed despite everything. The audacity of it, the sheer calculated coldness, sent fresh rage flooding through my system. I surged upward, crossing the space between us in a blur of motion. My hand shot past her shoulder, slamming flat against the door to keep it closed. She flinched sideways, pressing herself against the wall. The fear that flashed across her face lasted only a heartbeat before the mask slipped back into place. "Get out!" I yanked the door open so hard it bounced off the interior wall. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of cut grass and distant rain. "Get out before I stop caring about consequences." She edged past me, movements careful and deliberate. On the front step, she paused and turned back. Her mouth opened as if to deliver some final threat or ultimatum. I slammed the door in her face. The deadbolt clicked home with a solid thunk that reverberated through the frame. Through the peephole, I watched her descend the steps, cross the lawn, disappear into a car parked 3 houses down. Red taillights flared, then faded into the darkness. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I slid down the door until I sat on the cold tile of the entryway, knees pulled to my chest. My phone lay on the side table where I'd dropped it hours ago, screen dark and silent. I needed to call someone, a lawyer, the police, someone who could help navigate this nightmare. But who would believe me over documented text messages? Who would see past the evidence she'd manufactured to the truth underneath? My hands shook as I pulled myself upright using the doorknob. In the living room, the overturned furniture and scattered papers testified to my earlier rage. I began mechanically righting chairs, restacking magazines, picking up the fallen photograph. The glass had cracked in a spiderweb pattern across my son's smiling face. Story block 810. The doorbell rang at 7:43 the next morning. I'd been awake since 4, watching the sunrise paint the walls in shades of amber and gold. My coffee had gone cold in the mug balanced on the arm of the couch. I hadn't moved from this spot in hours, couldn't make my body respond to basic commands. Through the front window, I caught the profile of a police cruiser parked at the curb. My stomach dropped. She'd actually done it. Called them first, gotten ahead of the narrative, painted herself as the victim before I could even consider my next move. I crossed to the door on legs that felt disconnected from my body. 2 officers stood on the porch, a younger woman with her hand resting on her belt, and a graying man who'd probably seen every variation of domestic drama this city could produce. "Mrs. Foster? I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Chen. We need to ask you some questions about an incident reported last night." "What incident?" The words came out hoarse. I hadn't spoken since screaming at Rebecca. Martinez consulted a notepad. "A Rebecca Thornton filed a complaint claiming you assaulted her at approximately 9:15 p.m. She has photographs of bruising on her arm." The manufactured evidence, the careful planning. I stepped back from the door, gesturing them inside before the neighbors could start their morning gossip ritual. They entered with the practiced wariness of people trained to expect violence from unexpected sources. Martinez's eyes swept the living room, cataloging the straightened furniture, the cracked photograph now sitting face down on the mantel. "I didn't assault anyone." I wrapped my arms around my torso, suddenly aware of how I must look. Unwashed, wearing yesterday's clothes, eyes red-rimmed from crying and sleeplessness. She came to my house. She threatened me. Chen produced a tablet, swiped through several images. He turned the screen toward me without comment. Rebecca's arm displayed an angry purple bruise, finger-shaped marks that looked damning and deliberate. Another photo showed her face, makeup smeared, expression haunted. This was taken at 11 p.m. last night at urgent care. Martinez's voice remained neutral, professional. She claims you grabbed her, threw her against a wall, threatened her life. That's not... I stopped myself, recognition flooding through me. The doorframe. I'd blocked her exit for maybe 3 seconds before yanking the door open. She must have slammed herself into something afterward, created the visual evidence to match her prepared story. Do you have any injuries? Chen asked. Anything that contradicts her account? I shook my head. My anger had been verbal, interior, controlled, despite feeling explosive. I'd touched nothing but the door. Martinez closed her notepad. We're going to need you to come down to the station. Answer some questions officially. Am I under arrest? Not yet, but we strongly recommend cooperation. I grabbed my phone and keys from the entry table, shoved my feet into sneakers without bothering to tie them. The cruiser outside seemed to pulse with silent judgment, drawing attention from every window on the block. Mrs. Chen from across the street stood watering plants that clearly didn't need it, her gaze fixed on my house with undisguised fascination. The back seat of the police car smelled like disinfectant and old fear. Martinez drove while Chen documented something on his tablet. Neither spoke. I watched my neighborhood slide past the window, each familiar landmark taking on an unreal quality. The corner store where I bought my son's favorite snacks. The park where he'd learned to ride a bike. The intersection where my entire life had turned left instead of right. At the station, they led me through a maze of hallways to a small interview room. Gray walls, scratched table, chairs bolted to the floor. Martinez gestured for me to sit, then positioned herself near the door while Chen set up a recording device. For the record, this is a voluntary interview with Cassandra Foster regarding complaint number. Chen rattled off a series of digits that meant nothing to me. They walked me through the previous evening step by methodical step. What time had Rebecca arrived? Had I invited her in? What was discussed? Had there been physical contact? I answered each question with robotic precision, watching their faces for signs of belief or skepticism. Martinez's expression remained carefully neutral. Chen took notes without looking up. Mrs. Thornton claims you discovered text messages on her phone. Martinez leaned forward slightly. Messages between her and your son. Can you tell us about that? She showed them to me. Said they were from him, but the timestamps were wrong. The language wasn't his. My hands clenched on the table edge. She fabricated them, set me up. Why would she do that? The question hung in the air like smoke. I had theories, jealousy, obsession, some twisted game I couldn't begin to comprehend. But theories weren't evidence. Theories wouldn't override photographs of bruises and manufactured text chains. I don't know. The admission tasted like defeat. Chen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at Martinez. Some wordless communication passed between them. Martinez stood, excusing herself from the room with professional courtesy that did nothing to ease the ice spreading through my chest. I sat alone for 17 minutes. I counted each one, watching the wall clock's second hand make its relentless circuit. The recording device's red light continued blinking its digital witness. When Martinez returned, she carried a manila folder. She sat across from me, opened it without preamble. Inside were printouts, screenshots of text messages I'd never seen before. "We obtained a warrant for your phone records." She slid the first page across the table. "These messages were sent from your number to Mrs. Thornton over the past 6 weeks." I stared at texts I'd never written, threats I'd never made, obscenities I'd never typed. Each one time-stamped and documented, building a narrative of escalating harassment. That's impossible. But even as I said it, I remembered Rebecca borrowing my phone 3 weeks ago when hers had died. The bathroom visit that had stretched 15 minutes while I'd waited in the coffee shop. She'd had access, opportunity, technical skill I'd never considered. Martinez retrieved the paper. "Mrs. Foster, I'm going to need you to remain here while we consult with the district attorney's office." The holding cell smelled of industrial cleaner and old fear. Cassandra sat on the metal bench, its cold surface pressing through her slacks. Her fingers traced the scratches carved into the wall beside her. Initials, dates, desperate prayers etched by hands that had waited here before hers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a constant electrical whine that burrowed into her skull. 4 hours passed. She watched shadows shift across the concrete floor as afternoon became evening. Her throat burned with thirst, but she hadn't asked for water. Asking meant acknowledging where she was, what was happening. The reality that her son's friend, someone she'd welcomed into their home, fed at their table, had constructed this elaborate trap. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Detective Chen appeared at the cell door, his expression carefully neutral. He unlocked it with a metallic clang that reverberated through the narrow space. "You're free to go." Cassandra remained seated, her body refusing to process the words. Chen stepped inside, offered his hand. She stared at it for 3 seconds before accepting, letting him pull her upright. Her legs trembled from hours of stillness. Your son came forward. Chen guided her down the hallway, his hand hovering near her elbow without quite touching. He brought his computer, had documentation we needed. They entered the same interrogation room where her world had fractured. Martinez sat at the table, and beside her was Darius, her 17-year-old son who looked like he'd aged 5 years since breakfast. His eyes were bloodshot, face pale beneath his brown skin. His laptop sat open between them, screen glowing with evidence Cassandra couldn't yet see. Darius stood when she entered. His chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made her flinch. He moved toward her, arms extended, then stopped halfway. The space between them felt vast, despite being only 6 feet. "Mom, I'm sorry, I should have—" His voice cracked. "Mr. Foster provided us with recordings." Martinez gestured to the laptop. Rebecca Thornton had been sending him messages for 3 months. Explicit content, increasingly aggressive when he didn't respond. He'd documented everything, blocked her repeatedly, but she created new accounts. Cassandra sank into a chair. Her hands gripped the table edge, knuckles whitening. Darius sat beside her, close enough that she could feel heat radiating from his body. He smelled like the cologne she'd bought him for Christmas, mixed with nervous sweat. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question emerged as a whisper. Darius stared at his hands, fingers twisted together in his lap. "I thought I could handle it. She said if I told anyone, she'd claim I started it, that she had ways to make people believe her." Martinez turned the laptop. Cassandra forced herself to look. Screenshots filled the screen. Messages from Rebecca that evolved from friendly to flirtatious to predatory. Photos Rebecca had sent. Requests Darius had refused. Then threats when he'd tried to distance himself. The timestamps showed escalation, desperation, manipulation refined over weeks. She was in your phone that day at the coffee shop. Chen placed a printed report on the table. Our tech specialist pulled your complete device history. She installed spyware, gained access to your messages, contacts, social media accounts, everything she needed to frame you. Cassandra's stomach churned. She remembered Rebecca's smile that afternoon, the casual way she'd asked to make a quick call. The 15 minutes that had seemed slightly long, but not alarming. How easily she'd returned the phone with thanks, an easy conversation. Rebecca's husband filed the charges at her direction. Martinez closed the laptop with a soft click. We brought her in an hour ago. She's being questioned now regarding identity theft, stalking a minor, filing false police reports, and evidence tampering. The room tilted slightly. Cassandra pressed her palms flat against the cool table, grounding herself. Darius shifted beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. The simple contact steadied something inside her chest. We'll need your full cooperation. Chen slid a business card across the table. Additional charges may be filed. The district attorney wants comprehensive statements from both of you. Cassandra nodded, the movement mechanical. Her mind struggled to shift from defendant to victim, from accused to wronged. Martinez gathered documents into folders, the rustling paper loud in the quiet room. Chen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, excused himself with professional efficiency. Darius touched her arm, fingers gentle against her sleeve. I should have trusted you. She turned to face him fully. His eyes held guilt that mirrored her own. The weight of secrets kept, protection attempted, consequences unforeseen. She pulled him into an embrace, feeling his shoulders shake as tension released. Her own tears came then, hot against his shoulder, washing away hours of controlled terror. Martinez stood, giving them privacy by turning toward the wall. The clock above the door showed 8:47 p.m., nearly 12 hours since Cassandra's morning had shattered. She held her son tighter, feeling his heartbeat against her chest, grateful for its steady rhythm. We go home now. She pulled back, cupped his face in her hands. Together. We deal with this together. 6 months later, Cassandra adjusted the easel on the community center's front lawn, her fingers steady as she positioned the welcome sign. Morning sun warmed her shoulders through the cotton blouse she'd chosen, bright yellow, a color she'd avoided for years. The fabric moved with her as she stepped back to assess the angle, checking that arriving visitors could read it from the parking lot. 3 women emerged from cars, chatting as they gathered art supplies from their trunks. Cassandra waved, recognizing regulars from her Tuesday painting classes. She'd started the program 8 weeks ago, using settlement money to fund free art workshops for neighborhood teens. The center's director had offered the space immediately, enthusiasm evident in how quickly she'd cleared bureaucratic obstacles. Darius appeared from inside, carrying folding chairs under each arm. At 16 now, he'd grown another inch, filled out through the shoulders. He moved with quiet confidence, no longer the hunched boy who'd sat in that police station. He set up chairs in neat rows, his movements efficient, practiced. They'd done this together 4 times already. Preparation had become ritual. Mom, the projector's ready. He didn't meet her eyes directly, but the tension that had marked their first months had softened. His therapist said progress looked different for everyone. Cassandra had learned to celebrate small victories, eye contact held for seconds longer, conversations initiated rather than deflected, his return to the basketball team. She followed him inside, where another young man adjusted equipment near the screen. Terrell, Darius's friend from school, had volunteered to handle technical aspects. He gave Cassandra a thumbs up, then returned attention to his laptop. Darius stood beside him, pointing at something on the screen, their heads bent together in easy companionship. Folding tables lined the side wall, covered with materials donated by local businesses. Cassandra arranged pamphlets about recognizing predatory behavior, hotline cards printed in 3 languages, information about legal resources. A detective from the district attorney's office would present today, part of the center's new youth safety initiative. Cassandra had pitched the program herself, speaking at city council meetings until they approved funding. Parents filtered in, some tentative, others purposeful. A father signed the attendance sheet, then immediately moved to the refreshment table Cassandra had set up earlier. She'd learned that food made difficult conversations easier. People needed something to do with their hands when discussing uncomfortable truths. The center's main room filled steadily. Cassandra greeted each arrival, shaking hands, meeting eyes, introducing herself by name and purpose. No shame colored her voice anymore. She'd spent months in therapy learning to separate her actions from another person's predation, to understand that a mother's trust wasn't a mother's failure. A woman approached, holding a teenage daughter's hand. The girl looked about 14, her expression wary beneath mascara. The mother's grip appeared tight, knuckles pale. Cassandra recognized desperation in the woman's face. That specific terror of realizing danger had touched your child. "Thank you for doing this." The mother's voice cracked slightly. "I didn't know where else to start." Cassandra squeezed her shoulder, the gesture brief but warm. "You start here, with truth, with information, with community." The detective arrived precisely at 10, a black woman named Williams who specialized in crimes against minors. She'd been patient with Darius during his statement, professional without being cold. She set up her materials with practiced efficiency, organizing slides about warning signs, manipulation tactics, legal definitions. Cassandra took a seat in the back row, watching the room settle into attentive silence. Darius sat 3 rows ahead with Terrell, his posture straight but relaxed. 6 months ago, he couldn't have sat through this presentation. 6 months ago, neither could she. Williams began speaking, her voice clear and authoritative. She clicked through slides showing statistics, case studies, survivor testimonials. The room remained quiet except for occasional note-taking sounds. Cassandra noticed several parents reaching for their children's hands, physical contact bridging the gap that difficult subjects created. Halfway through, Williams paused on a slide about legal recourse. She referenced a recent case, didn't name names, but Cassandra knew. Victoria's trial had concluded 3 weeks ago. Attempted sexual assault of a minor, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice. 7 years in prison, possibility of parole after 4. The judge had been merciless during sentencing, calling the betrayal particularly egregious given the defendant's position of trusted friendship. Cassandra's hands remained steady in her lap. She'd attended the sentencing, sat behind the prosecutor while Victoria's lawyer argued for leniency. Darius had chosen not to come, and she'd supported that decision. Different people healed through different means. The presentation concluded with resource information and a question and answer session. Parents raised hands, asking about school policies, social media monitoring, how to discuss boundaries without causing paranoia. Williams answered each inquiry with specific, actionable advice. Cassandra jotted notes for future workshops, ideas already forming for expanded programming. As the crowd dispersed, several attendees approached her directly. They thanked her, shared their own stories in hushed voices, asked if she'd consider speaking at their churches or neighborhood associations. Cassandra collected contact information, promising follow-ups. This work, helping others navigate what she'd survived, felt purposeful in ways her previous life never had. Darius helped fold chairs, stacking them on the wheeled cart with mechanical precision. Terrell worked beside him, the two moving in synchronized rhythm. They'd become close after everything, Terrell's steadiness providing Darius something he'd needed. Cassandra had learned not to hover, to let her son build his own support systems. She locked the center's front doors after the last visitor left, then stood on the steps beside Darius. The parking lot stretched empty under noon sun, heat waves rising from asphalt. Her car waited in the shade of an oak tree, its yellow paint bright against green leaves. "You hungry?" She touched his arm lightly. "Always." A small smile crossed his face, the first she'd seen today. They drove to their favorite lunch spot, a Vietnamese restaurant downtown. The owner knew their order by heart now. Pho for Darius, spring rolls for Cassandra, iced coffee for both. They ate without much conversation, comfortable in shared silence. Back home, Cassandra changed into painting clothes, then headed to the converted garage she'd transformed into a studio. Canvases lined the walls in various stages of completion, abstract pieces mostly, colors bleeding into shapes that suggested emotion rather than form. She'd discovered painting during therapy, her counselor suggesting creative outlets for processing trauma. She mixed colors on her palette, lost herself in the meditation of brushstrokes. Hours passed unmarked except by changing light through the window. Darius appeared eventually, knocking on the doorframe though the door stood open. "Dr. Patterson called. Confirmed for Thursday." "Thanks, baby." She set down her brush, studying the canvas. "How are you feeling about it?" He shrugged, the gesture neither dismissive nor uncomfortable. "It helps." They'd found Patterson together, interviewed 3 therapists before choosing him. Darius had liked his directness, the way he didn't sugarcoat or patronize. Cassandra attended her own sessions with a different counselor, someone who specialized in maternal trauma and rebuilding trust. Evening arrived in shades of purple and gold. Cassandra grilled chicken on the patio while Darius set the table inside. They ate dinner together, a boundary she'd established early in their healing. No phones, no television, just food and whatever conversation emerged naturally. Sometimes they talked about his day, his basketball games, college plans. Sometimes they ate in comfortable quiet. Later, after dishes were cleaned and kitchen counters wiped down, Cassandra sat on her bedroom floor with a scrapbook. She'd started documenting their recovery, not dwelling on trauma, but celebrating progress. Photos from Darius's games, programs from her art workshops, acceptance letters from universities they'd visited together. Physical proof that life continued, that healing wasn't linear, but was possible. She added today's attendance sheet to a page, writing the date in careful script. 6 months. Some days felt like years, others like moments. She'd learned to measure progress in tiny increments. Darius laughing at dinner, her own ability to trust again, their shared understanding that survival wasn't the end of the story. Her phone buzzed with a text from the community center director. 3 more parents had called requesting information about the next workshop. Cassandra smiled, typing a quick response promising to coordinate schedules. This purpose she'd found, not despite what happened, but because of it, felt solid beneath her feet. She closed the scrapbook, ran her fingers across its fabric cover. Tomorrow, she'd teach painting to teenagers. Next week, another safety workshop. Next month, Darius would start applications to colleges across the state. Life stretched forward, complicated, but no longer paralyzed. Cassandra stood, moved to her window. The neighborhood lay quiet under streetlights, houses glowing with warm interior light. Somewhere out there, other families navigated their own struggles, their own healing. She couldn't fix everything, couldn't prevent every harm. But she could speak truth, offer resources, build community from the ashes of betrayal. Her reflection stared back from darkened glass. A woman rebuilt, different than before, stronger in unexpected places. She touched the window, feeling cool smoothness beneath her palm. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own small victories. Tonight, she simply stood in gratitude for survival, for her son sleeping down the hall, for the possibility of peace. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.